who's actually responsible for the American kill line? In my last video, I talked about how it's a very deliberate choice of American policy and social philosophy to enforce the conditions that create this kill line. A system should be defined by the results that it achieved. But there are still some people who argue that American policymakers, business owners, aren't the ones that actually hold the blame. In fact, you'll see scapegoating on both sides of the American political spectrum, saying that it's not their fault, it's in fact the fault of immigrants or of China, of industrializing global South countries, or of unfair trade deals with allies and partners, and that none of this is really America's own fault. Now we're just being taken advantage of. But it is true that underlying all of this is globalism. So let's go back a couple of decades to the beginning of globalization efforts. Who was leading the charge wholeheartedly? The US. The US-led world order is the one under which globalization became the word of the day. So as a direct result of this, we saw offshoring, the moving of manufacturing to developing countries, and the US business leaders and politicians were thrilled about this because it meant lower costs of goods and labor and higher profits. This meant that the US economy had to transition to a service-based economy. Along with that, the financialization of the entire economy began to occur rapidly. Again, these were all things that were actively pursued and supported by American politicians on both sides. But while in the US we have some of the lowest costs of goods, our costs of essential services have increased as big corporations and financial institutions now are dependent on rent-seeking behavior. So this is exactly why the costs of those things that Americans need to live healthy, productive lives, housing, education, healthcare, and retirement, are increasing at a much faster rate than wages. So yeah, you could argue that globalization is fundamentally the root cause of this K-shaped economy that we live in. But again, the US, up until just a few years ago, was the biggest supporter and backer of globalization, even at the cost of its own citizens. So if you really think that anyone else is to blame, I don't know what to tell you.